When learning code, sometimes the best way to learn is by coding, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to do some HTML, and then we're going to style it with some CSS. Lastly, we're going to add some JavaScript for some interactivity. So let's get to it. From your desktop, navigate to your favorite browser. Mine is Google Chrome, so that's what I'm going to use. From there, come to your nav bar and type in js, then fiddle.net. Press enter. JSFiddle is a cool way to write little snippets of code for you to mess around with, and that's what we're going to do here. So let's start with some HTML. Tags are written with an open caret, and then the tag name, and then a closed caret. So for us, div is our tag name, so we're going to write div. This is an opening tag. So we need to close our tag that surrounds any content that we'll put inside of it. So if you move out and then press enter, I like to do this on another line. We're going to do a closing tag, which is a open caret, a slash, and then the same tag name that you used in your opening tag. So for us, it's div. So we're going to type that, and then a close caret. And that's HTML, and it really is that simple. So we can move in between here. Well, first, let's understand what a div is. A div is just a divider. It really doesn't do much. So with JSFiddle, what you do is you press run. And when it runs, over here, you should see your output of the code that you've written. But we don't see anything because a div is essentially almost nothing for us right now. It just divides out content. So let's write some more code. Let's do an h1 tag. It's very similar to the div tag. We just do our opening caret, our tag name, which is h1, and then a close caret. And then we need to close it, just like we did for the div tag. And that's the same with a slash, and then h1, and then our close caret. I typically like to open and close my tags before I start doing content because it's easy to forget to close your tags if you just start writing content. So let's move in between those two tags, and I like to press enter just so I can see. And I'm going to write hello. From there, if we go up to our run button and we press run, now we see hello pop in on our output. So let's continue writing some HTML. Let's do a paragraph. Now a paragraph tag name is p. So just like we did with div and h1, we do with a p. So we open the caret, put a p in there, and then close the caret. And then the same way we need our closing tag for p, so we write our open caret slash p close caret. And then to move in between the two tags. And then write something like, my name is Matt, but use your name. Then we come back up here and we press run. And now we have a paragraph. This is HTML. Now let's move over to some CSS and give our HTML some style. Over here in your CSS area, you click inside there, and we're going to start using selectors. Selectors are a way you actually kind of reach into your HTML and give some style to them. So we're going to select our div. So the way you do that is you just write div. And then you do an opening curly bracket. And I like to close my curly brackets because it's easy to get lost with all your code. And you move in between the two opening and closing curly brackets. And you press enter. From there, we're going to start styling. We're going to give this div a background color. And the way you do that is you background dash color. This is a CSS property. The way you now give that property a value is you do a colon, space, and we're just going to do hash and then a semicolon. If we go up and we press run, we can now see this beautiful grayish background. Let's give this some more styling. We're going to come underneath our background color style, and we're going to give it some padding. So that's simple by doing padding, padding, colon, and let's do 5 pixels, and then your semicolon. From there, go up and press run. Now we have a little bit more breathing room for our content within our div. Now let's give this a nice little rounded corner. If we come down underneath padding and we do border dash radius with our colon, and we're going to do, let's say, 10 pixels. And we come up here and we press run. You can kind of see on this edge over here, it's kind of rounded out. It'd be easier to see if we actually had a border on there, so let's do that. So underneath border radius, we do border. And we're going to say 3 things right now instead of just 1. The first one's going to be the size of our border, which for us it will be 2 pixels. The style of your border, which is going to be solid. And then the color for our border, which will be a little bit darker gray, which is CCC, CCC, and then our semicolon. Let's run this. And now we can see our border radius and our border. Different devices have different ways of displaying borders. For Android, it's a bit more boxy and more squarish, but for iOS, which is Mac, it's a little bit more rounded in their corners. So just keep that in mind as you build out your styles for your various devices. Now, let's get our H1. So underneath our closing curly bracket here, we're going to enter, and we're going to select it just the same way that we selected our div with H1. And then our opening curly bracket and our closing curly bracket. We're going to move in between those and press enter. We're going to give a color to our text here. Let's do color. We're going to give it a kind of red here. So we're going to do hash, then 993333, and then our semicolon. From here we can press run, and we see that our H1 here is a little bit more red. Lastly, we're going to get a group selector going. So underneath this closing curly bracket for H1, we're going to come down, and the way you do group selectors is with a common separated list. What that means is we both want our H1 and our P tag to share a similar style. So the way you accomplish this is you do H1, comma, and I like to put this on the next line, but you don't have to, P. So from there you just write your CSS like normal. You do your opening curly bracket, your closing curly bracket, move in between, and press enter. We're going to give this a font family, which is kind of like a font face, or a type of font that we would like to give it. So the way we declare that is font-family. I'm going to give it my favorite font, which is Helvetica. And then what happens is not all browsers are the same, and they'll render font families differently. So we have to give it a fallback for older browsers that might not understand what Helvetica actually is. The way you do that is do a comma after Helvetica, and then we're going to give it a generic type, which is sans-serif. And then our semicolon. Now if we come up to the run button, we run this, and now our font is beautiful. Alright, now we're going to do some JavaScript. This actually adds some interactivity to our app. Makes it fun, or makes it more interactive. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to write a function. And this function is going to do something. That's what functions do. They're kind of like verbs. They're actions within your applications that take place. The way you do this with JavaScript is they have a keyword called function. So we're going to write that. Function. And then a space. After the space, we need to give our function a name. You can call it whatever you like. I'm going to call it hello. After you type out hello, the next step in making a function is a open parentheses and a close parentheses. After that, I typically put a space and then an opening curly bracket. You don't have to put a space, but typically it's a little bit easier to read. And then after this opening curly bracket, I typically do a close curly bracket. And this closes your function. I also do this open close thing like I do in CSS because it can get really confusing to know when you need to close your function after you've written a lot of code. So then after that, I move in between the two curly brackets, and then I press enter. And I'm going to press enter again, and I'm going to move in between them, and now I'm typing in between the two curly brackets. Typically here, I'll give some space so that you can see an indentation to know where you kind of are in the code. So I'm going to press tab. After this, we want to do something. Now, for JavaScript and inside of a browser, you have this thing called alert, which just brings up a pop-up menu that says whatever you want it to say. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to write the word alert. Yep. And then after that, you want an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses. And then a semicolon, kind of like CSS. It kind of is your punctuation. It ends a statement inside of JavaScript. Now inside of alert, we have to tell it what we want it to say, because right now it won't say anything for us. So we have to move in between the parentheses here, and we have to do an opening quote. And again, I'm going to close my quote because it's easy to forget when to close your quote, and you might miss it and it might break everything, so you don't want that. So we move in between our two quotes, and I'll just retype, hello, Matt. Use your name if you would like. So after that, we have this function, but it can't do anything, it's just sitting there. What we're going to do now is tie it to some HTML, say a button. So when we click on the button, we get a nice little pop-up that says hello to ourselves. Now this way is kind of outdated what I'm going to do, and there's many different ways to solve many different problems within programming and code in general. So I encourage you to go out to Google and explore other ways you might add events, is what we're going to call this, to a HTML element. So what we're going to do now is come up to our HTML, and after our p tag, our closing p tag here, we're going to press enter. And then I like to give some breathing room, some space, so I press enter again. And now we're going to make a button, which is just like the other tags. It's just the tag name is button. So we're going to do our opening caret, and then do button, and then our closing caret. Just like with all the other tags, I'm going to close my tag so I remember to do it. So we're going to do that. It's the same way as with div, h1, and p, our opening caret, our slash, and then button, and then our close caret. Now I'm going to move in between these two tags, and I'm going to type click me. Now let's run this. When we run this and we come down here and we press click me, nothing happens. It's because we haven't tied our function to the HTML element. So let's go do that in our HTML. So in between this last in here and this caret, put a space. And then you're going to type something called on click, just like that. And then you press equal. And then you do opening quote and closing quote, just because I like to close things because I'll forget to do it and it'll break everything. So we move in between those two quotes and we write our function name, hello. And then our close parentheses and our open. Excuse me, sorry, that was our opening parentheses and closing parentheses. We come up to our run, click it, come down to our click me button, and we press it, and nothing works. This is common when doing code. So what we have to go do is figure out why this didn't work. So I went offline for a little bit because I was running into technical difficulties. And this really happens a lot more than you think. So I went out to Google and searched things. Like I said, I normally don't use this technique, so I had to refresh my mind on how to do it, and how to do it within JS Fiddle. So if we look back at the code, we're going to see this is the right code. One thing that I had wrong was I spelled alert wrong. The other thing is in JS Fiddle, the way it runs kind of strange. So we have to come over here to the left side. Yours probably says, well, there's this drop down under no library pure JS and then no wrap in body. Yours probably says on load. If you do it on load, it's not going to work. So the way you get it to work is you hit this drop down, you come down and put in no wrap dash in body. When you do that and you run, let that load, come down to click me, and you hit the button, and there we go. It works. It's a JS Fiddle only quirk, so don't worry about it when you're normally coding, but just remember in JS Fiddle to put it in a no wrap in body if you would like to run your code in this way. Well, that wraps up our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript lesson. I hope you've learned a lot. And now that you have a basic knowledge of these skills, go out to Google and search and learn more. There's tons of valuable and easily accessible material out there for you to learn. Use tools like JS Fiddle to go out and play and figure things out before you spend hours and hours trying to figure out how to code something. And lastly, we're going to be providing more information on how you may launch your app in the future. So stay tuned.